G'day everyone, thanks for tuning in. These are the water tanks that are going in my Toyota Coaster bus, and in this video I am going to be installing them. I got these tanks from RV Tanks Australia. I'll put a link to their website in the description below if you want to check them out. They make a whole bunch of different size tanks, all different sizes, all different shapes. They make quite a few tanks specific to various models of vehicles. So for instance, like mine, if you've got a Toyota Coaster, they've got a range of tanks that will fit under there. If you've got a Sprinter van, they've got tanks that'll fit. So a whole bunch of different ones, and they can also do custom tank builds as well if you're looking for something a little bit different. I just bought my tanks off the shelf. They were like a standard size that they make. I've got 4 of them, so I've got 3 of these 60-litre tanks. I think they're the RVM 60. If you scroll on the website you'll see these. They're 600mm long, 330mm wide and 330mm deep. And then I've got one that's slightly smaller. So this is an RVM 50. It's a 50-litre tank, and it's the same length, so it's 600mm long, but it's only 300mm wide and 300mm high, so it's a little bit smaller. They're made from a special food-grade plastic, so they're perfectly safe for drinking water, and they're designed specifically to bolt straight up under the floor of the Toyota Coaster, so you don't need any special brackets, or you don't have to bolt anything to the chassis underneath to fit these. And they've been making them for many years. There are a lot of people like myself who have installed these in their buses with no problem, so they come very highly recommended. And certainly all of the dealings that I've had with them, they are really great to deal with. The service has always been really good, so I do recommend those guys. Check out their website, tell them I sent you. So at the back of the bus on either side of the spare tyre, I'm going to have, like behind the rear wheels, I'm going to have a tank. So on the driver's side it'll be this grey water tank, and on the passenger side at the back I'll have a 60-litre freshwater tank. And then towards the front of the bus, in front of the rear wheels, I'm going to have another tank this size for fresh water on the driver's side, and then this little 50-litre tank will be going just behind where the bus batteries are on the passenger side. Some people are able to fit 4 of these 60-litre tanks in the positions that I'm going to be fitting mine, but my particular bus just has a piece of angle under the floor that's in the way. I can't quite fit a 60-litre one there, which is why I've gone for the slightly smaller version. Each of these tanks has 4 holes in the top, and that's where the bolts go, so up through there and up through the floor of the bus. And the other good thing about getting your tanks from RV Tanks Australia is that they will put the holes exactly where you want them. So if you have a look around the front here, each of these tanks you'll see has a hole here in this position, and that's there in all the tanks. It's part of the molding process to have a hole there. You could use that for an inlet or an outlet or something else if it suited your needs. In my case, I'm just going to plug that particular hole. And I've got them to drill some other threaded holes in the tank. So these ones at the top are for my breather hoses, and the ones at the bottom will be the inlet outlet pipes for the particular tank. So you'll see my freshwater tanks have a 1/2 inch hole for the inlet, and because I'm just going to be using the 12mm John Guest pipes for my plumbing, which I'll talk about a bit later in a later video when I get to that stage. The grey tank I'm going to be using 25mm, so 1-inch drainage pipes. That's why this one has a slightly bigger hole, but they can put their holes anywhere on the tank where you want them. Before I can install these tanks under the floor, I need to put these fittings in for the breather hoses, because these tanks are going to be sitting right up underneath the floor, under here, so I won't be able to thread this fitting in once the tank's installed. So I'm going to make sure I've got all the breather hose fittings in place before I install the tanks.
I've never used thread tape in my life, and I wasn't really sure how you're supposed to put it on. I've since found out the important thing is to wrap the tape in the same direction as the thread's going, which I think is what I'm doing here. I'm not sure I did that for all of the breather hose fittings, but they all went in fine. They seem to tighten up okay. Hopefully they won't leak. I guess we'll find out one day.
So I'm on the passenger side of the bus here, and the first freshwater tank that I'm going to put in is this 50 litre one, so the slightly smaller one, and it's going to be going under the floor here, just in front of the rear wheels. So just behind where the door is here is where the starter batteries for the bus are located. So this tank will be going in the space in between the batteries and the rear wheels. So if I get under the bus here, oh, hopefully I'll be able to show you. Oh, so hopefully you can see this. Okay, so there's the rear wheels, and up above me here is where the starter batteries are. And there is a little bit of space here, but it's not big enough to fit a water tank. So this here is the space where the water tank's going to go. So this is the underneath of my marine ply floor that I've got on the bus, and this is where the water tank is going to go. The hardest part with installing these tanks is actually just lifting the tank up into position. It would probably be easier to do this with 2 people, but anyway, it's just me here at the moment. So I'm using a jack to actually help lift up the tank and hold it in position while I mark where the holes and everything need to go, and I find this helps a lot. It's just the initial manoeuvring of the tank into position onto the jack that's the tricky bit. Alright, so I've got this tank sitting in position where it needs to go. I've got it, it's really hard to see under here guys, sorry, but I've got it pushed up against, come around here. I've got it pushed up against this chassis rail here as far as I can. And you can see there's really not a lot of room under here, but it just fits. And you can also see what I was talking about with the breather hose fitting, how close it is to the floor under there. There is no way you'd be able to thread that on once the tank's installed, so you absolutely need to put them on first. Even just accessing that to get the hose itself on is going to be a little bit tricky. But anyway, so if I come around here, you might be able to see the hole in the top of the tank. There is where I need to drill, and I'm just not going to be able to get the drill up in there. Oh, it is almost impossible to film under there. What I'm going to do is draw with a pencil, I'm going to mark a line around the edge of the tank where it is sitting against the floor, and I'm also going to mark the positions of the 4 holes, and then what I'm going to do is just drop the tank again out of the way so I can drill the holes, and then I'll have to lift the tank back into position. So it's a bit of a pain having to put the tank up twice, but it's just the way it is because there's just not enough room to get my drill up from underneath. This is the way I've got to do it. Let's crack on and get it done. So you can see the outline that I've drawn around the edge of the tank in the yellow there, and I've also marked the position of the 4 holes that need to be drilled. So what I'm going to do now is just drill some pilot holes up through the floor from here, because I can see exactly where the hole needs to be, so hopefully get the drill nice and centered in where I've marked. And then what I'll do is I'll go up inside the bus with the bigger drill bit and drill down, because it's a lot easier for me to control the drill and keep it nice and straight when I'm not laying upside down under a bus. So I'll just get the little pilot holes drilled first so I can see from above the floor where the holes need to go. Alright, well, I'm not sure if you can see this, but I can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes here. So now I can see where the holes need to be. I'm going to get my larger 12mm drill bit and drill a bigger hole from the top here. Okay, I now have 4 big holes in the floor. So the bolts will come up through the floor to the top here. Now I could just use some washers on those, underneath those nuts, but what I'm actually going to do, I've cut these strips from 3mm aluminium, so they're fairly strong, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them over the holes and bring the bolts up through these. So these are basically acting like big washers, because when these tanks are full of water, there's going to be quite a bit of weight pulling down on these bolts. So this is just for my own peace of mind, so they've got a bit more surface area to grip onto, so they're not sort of pulling through the softer floor, and helps to spread the load a little bit more. So what I'm going to do now is just put these strips over the holes, and I'm going to go back underneath the bus and mark with a marking pen where the holes are so that I can drill them through this. Okay, and there is where I've got to drill my holes.
When you're using big drill bits to drill holes in metal like I am here, it's really easy for the drill bit to get jammed in the hole, and when this happens it can really flick the drill out, and if you're not careful you'll break your wrist on it. It's quite dangerous. So the important thing is to make sure you've got your piece clamped really firmly, as I have here, and that you just take your time, go really steady with the drill. And you'll notice, like, as it's getting close to going all the way through the metal, the drill will start to vibrate a lot more, and you'll hear a change in the way it sounds. And when I started to notice that, I just backed off the pressure a little bit, just went really gently, really steady, and tried to keep it as still as possible for that final bit.
Alright, so there's my plates with the hole, and you can see the holes line up nicely. I've also in these ones put a couple of smaller holes so that I can just screw the plate down into the floor as well, just because it wasn't quite sitting flat. And this one in particular is underneath my table, so it's going to be kind of visible. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to build any sort of little fake floor over the top or just cover it with a rug, or I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this, but I at least want these plates to be sitting flat, so I'm also going to just pop a couple of little screws in there so that they're flat on the floor. But anyway, that's ready now to put the bolts in, and I'm going to get my dad to give me a hand with this, because this is definitely a two-person job. You need one person under the bus to hold the bolt still, and another person up inside the bus to tighten it. So we're going to go ahead and do that now, and then this tank will be installed.
And there it is. I'm really happy with where this one's sitting. It's nice and firm up against the floor. It's sitting in the space really well. And from the outside, you can hardly even see it. It doesn't hang below the body at all.
And this is what it looks like on the inside. So I've used high tensile M10 bolts for these water tanks, so they're super strong. And hopefully you can see if I come a bit closer. I've used lock nuts as well, and in addition to the lock nut, I've also used a contact washer, and these are special washers. I don't know if you can see, they've got some serrations. They're sort of like conical shaped, and they've got serrations on one side, and the idea is that these washers resist vibration and just help to give the nut a little bit extra grip. So in combination with the lock nuts, these should not go anywhere. So that should well and truly hold the tanks in place. I'm not really happy with the bolts sticking out of the floor here, because this is going to be visible because this is under my table. I'm tempted actually to swap these around so that instead of the nut being on top on the inside, just the bolt head is on the inside. So that will sit like a little bit closer to the floor and like not stick out as much. I originally did it this way because I want to be able to keep an eye on these tanks periodically and make sure they're not coming loose, and it's a lot easier when you can see, you know, the nut on the thread to check whether it's moved at all. It's really hard to see that from underneath the bus. The other 3 tanks I don't mind being this way because they'll all have things built over the top of them. You won't really be able to see them unless you pull stuff off to have a look at them. And I guess if those 3 tanks haven't moved, then this one's unlikely to move either. So I might have a go at swapping them over and see how that looks actually, because I'm really not happy with them sticking out that far underneath my table. I think that's going to get in my way and annoy me.
So this is my second freshwater tank. This is a 60-litre one, and I've got it positioned on the driver's side between the air conditioner and the exhaust outlet. And as you can see, like the other one, it barely hangs below the body at all, so it fits really nicely in that space. And here are my tanks at the rear. So on the left-hand side, I've got another 60-litre freshwater tank, and the one on the right-hand side is a 60-litre grey tank. Now, these ones at the back do hang a little bit below the body, just at the very back of the bus, because the body of the bus kind of angles up a little bit in this section. I don't think it's enough to cause any issues. I can always swap these tanks out for the slightly smaller 50-litre ones, but I really could use the extra storage space, and lots of people have these size tanks in this position in their buses without any issues, so I think we'll be okay. And this is what it looks like on the inside.
So you can see that one's under the bed, and the 2 at the back here, the washing machine and everything will be built in over the top of that. This one here, the toilet will be built in over the top of that, so you won't really see any of these ones. It's just this one here that's under my table that you'll see that I really don't like having that sticking out of the floor. But at this point, I'm just happy to have the water tanks in. Definitely a 2-person job, not only to put the bolts in, but it does help to have a second person when you're lifting the tank up into position under the floor, because they are quite heavy, the tanks, even without water in them. So yeah, it was good that I had my dad to help. So all 4 tanks are in, and I can cross another job off the list.